The sun was shining bright, the kind of day that makes you want to grab your friends and head outdoors. The woman who owned the lakeside cabin had been waiting for this moment for weeks. She'd inherited the place from her uncle a few months ago, and today was the first time she was bringing her closest pals over to enjoy it. The group had planned everything: kayaking, a lakeside picnic, maybe even a bonfire later if the mood struck them. It was supposed to be a perfect day. They arrived early in the morning, unloading their gear from the car. The lake stretched out before them, calm and inviting, like glass reflecting the blue sky above. The group laughed as they carried the kayaks down to the water's edge. Everyone was excited, chatting about how nice it felt to escape the city noise for once. For the woman, it was more than just fun. It was a chance to honor her uncle's memory by sharing his favorite spot with people she cared about. But little did they know, trouble was lurking nearby. Not far from where they stood, a woman known around the neighborhood as HOA Karen was watching them through binoculars from her deck. Karen lived in one of the fancy houses up on the hill, and she took pride in enforcing every single rule set by the Homeowners Association, HOA. To her, anyone who wasn't part of the gated community was an outsider, and outsiders didn't belong near her lake. Karen frowned as she observed the scene below. Who were these people? Why were they here? And why did they think they could just waltz onto what she considered private property? She muttered to herself, grabbing her clipboard, a tool she always carried when dealing with such matters. Rules were rules, after all, and Karen made sure everyone followed them, whether they liked it or not. Down at the lake, the group was completely unaware of Karen's growing irritation. They were too busy setting up their picnic blanket and snapping pictures of the beautiful scenery. Just as they were about to push off in their kayaks, Karen appeared on the shoreline, marching toward them with purpose. Her heels clicked against the rocks, and her voice rang out sharply, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere. "Excuse me," she called out, her tone dripping with authority. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The woman turned, startled. "Oh, hi," she said politely. "We're just enjoying the lake. Is there a problem?" "Yes, there is," Karen replied, pointing at the group dramatically. "This is private HOA property. You're trespassing." The woman blinked, taken aback. "Trespassing? I'm pretty sure this is my land. My uncle left it to me." Karen crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. "That doesn't matter. These are HOA rules, and they apply to everyone. If your guests aren't residents of this community, they need to leave. Now." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody wanted to cause a scene, but none of them understood why they couldn't stay. After all, they weren't harming anything, they were just trying to have a good time. The woman stepped forward, keeping her voice calm despite feeling frustrated. "I don't think you understand," she said firmly. "This property has been in my family for years. We've got papers proving we own this land. So unless you can show me something that says otherwise, I'm not asking my friends to go anywhere." Karen's face reddened. She hated being challenged, especially in front of other people. "Fine," she snapped. "If you won't listen to reason, I'll document this." With that, she whipped out her phone and started taking photos of the group. The flash went off repeatedly, making everyone uncomfortable. The woman clenched her fists, resisting the urge to argue further. She knew better than to let Karen provoke her into saying something she might regret. Instead, she forced a tight smile and said, "Go ahead and take your pictures. But trust me, this isn't over." After Karen finally stomped away, the group tried to shake off the awkwardness and continue with their plans. Still, the encounter left a sour taste in everyone's mouths. As the afternoon wore on, the woman found herself distracted, replaying the confrontation in her mind. Something about Karen's attitude didn't sit right. Why was she so determined to kick them off the lake? Was she really acting within her rights, or was she just bullying people because she could? By the time her friends packed up to leave, the woman had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let Karen ruin her experience or intimidate her into giving up something that rightfully belonged to her. Once everyone was gone, she sat alone by the fire pit, staring out at the water. There had to be a way to prove once and for all that this was her land and that Karen had no business telling her what to do. Little did she know, the answer was closer than she thought. All it would take was a little digging and a lot of determination to turn the tables on Karen for good. The next morning, the woman woke up with a mix of frustration and determination swirling in her mind. The encounter with Karen had left her unsettled, but it also lit a fire inside her. She wasn't about to let someone else dictate what she could or couldn't do on her own property. Still, she knew that emotions wouldn't solve anything. She needed facts. Hard, undeniable proof that this land was hers and that Karen's claims were baseless. After a quick breakfast, she sat down at the small wooden desk in the cabin, opened her laptop, and started searching for answers. The first place she looked was the stack of documents she'd inherited from her uncle. Among them were old deeds, maps, and letters he'd saved over the years. Her uncle had always been meticulous when it came to legal matters, and now she was grateful for his careful record-keeping. As she sifted through the papers, one document caught her eye: a faded map of the property lines around the lake. It showed exactly where her land began and ended, including a section that extended into the water itself. But the map alone wasn't enough. She needed to confirm its accuracy and make sure it held up legally today. So, she reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in property law. After explaining the situation, the lawyer agreed to meet her later that day to review the documents. While waiting for the meeting, she decided to take a walk along the shoreline. The peacefulness of the lake helped clear her head, but it also made her angry. How dare Karen march in and try to ruin something so special? This place wasn't just a piece of land, it was full of memories. Her uncle used to bring her here as a child, teaching her how to fish and skip stones across the water. Those moments were priceless, and no one, not even someone like Karen, was going to take that away from her. Later that afternoon, she met with the lawyer at his office. He listened intently as she recounted the story, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When she handed him the map and other documents, his eyes widened slightly. "This is interesting," he said, flipping through the pages. "Based on what I'm seeing here, your property does indeed include access to the lake and potentially more than you might realize." He went on to explain that the original deed predated the formation of the Homeowners Association. Back then, the area hadn't been divided into gated communities or governed by strict HOA rules. In fact, her parcel of land came with certain rights, including shared use of the lake and even ownership of a small portion of it. According to the map, the boundary line cut directly through the water, meaning part of the lake technically belonged to her. The lawyer smiled reassuringly. "If these documents are legitimate, and they appear to be, you have a strong case. The HOA may oversee common areas, but they don't have jurisdiction over privately owned land. Karen doesn't have the authority to tell you or your guests what to do here." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. For the first time since the confrontation, she felt confident instead of cornered. Armed with this newfound knowledge, she asked the lawyer to draft a formal letter to the HOA board. The letter would outline her rights as a landowner and request that Karen stop interfering. It would also serve as a warning: if the harassment continued, she wouldn't hesitate to escalate the matter legally. Over the next few days, she waited anxiously for a response. Meanwhile, she couldn't help but think about Karen and how entitled she must feel to act the way she did. Who gave her the right to police other people's lives? Was it boredom? A need for control? Or maybe she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, misguided as it was. Whatever the reason, it didn't excuse her behavior. Finally, the reply came. The HOA board had received the letter and promised to investigate further. They assured her that they took her concerns seriously and would get back to her soon. While the message sounded polite enough, she suspected Karen wouldn't take the news well. Sure enough, rumors began circulating around the neighborhood. People whispered about the new owner who dared stand up to Karen, while others quietly cheered her on. Some neighbors even approached her during her walks, thanking her for having the courage to challenge the status quo. Despite the support, she remained cautious. She knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. If anything, the woman would likely double down, trying to discredit her or find loopholes in the documents. But she was ready for whatever came next. She had done her homework, gathered evidence, and stood firmly on solid ground. No amount of intimidation or theatrics could change the truth. As the days passed, she found herself reflecting on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about defending her property, it was about standing up for fairness and respect. Too often, people like Karen got away with bullying because others were afraid to speak out. But silence only emboldened them. By refusing to back down, she hoped to inspire others to do the same, to question authority, demand accountability, and protect what was rightfully theirs. One evening, as she sat by the water watching the sunset, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The battle wasn't over yet, but she had already won something important: her confidence. She knew who she was, what she stood for, and why it mattered. And no matter what happened next, she vowed never to let anyone make her doubt that again. The woman felt a mix of nerves and excitement as she prepared to return to the lake. Armed with the lawyer's letter and copies of her property documents, she was ready to face Karen head-on. This time, though, she wouldn't be caught off guard or let emotions get the better of her. She had facts on her side, and she planned to use them wisely. Before heading out, she gathered her friends again. Word had spread about her confrontation with Karen, and they were eager to support her. Some brought snacks, others brought extra chairs for a lakeside picnic. The mood was light-hearted, but there was an underlying tension in the air. Everyone knew Karen might show up, and no one was sure how things would play out. Still, the group was determined to enjoy their day and stand by the woman who had worked so hard to defend their right to be there. As they unpacked their gear and set up near the water, it didn't take long for Karen to make her appearance. True to form, she marched down the path leading to the shoreline, clipboard in hand and a scowl edged across her face. Her eyes scanned the scene, clearly irritated to see the same group back again. For a moment, she hesitated, perhaps sensing that something was different this time. But she quickly shook it off and strode forward, her heels clicking against the rocky ground. "Well, well," Karen said loudly, stopping a few feet away. "I see you're still here. Didn't I make myself clear last time?" The woman turned to face her, calm and composed. "You did," she replied evenly. "But I think it's time we cleared up a few things." Karen raised an eyebrow, clutching her clipboard tighter. "What are you talking about?" Without missing a beat, the woman pulled out a folder containing copies of the property documents and handed them to Karen. "Take a look at these," she said confidently. "They prove that this land and part of the lake belongs to me. My uncle owned it for decades, and now it's mine. So unless you can show me something that overrides this, I suggest you stop harassing me and my guests." For a moment, Karen just stood there, staring at the papers in disbelief. Her face flushed red, and her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the documents. She tried to maintain her usual authoritative tone, but her voice wavered. This can't be right. You're lying. These rules don't apply anymore." The woman crossed her arms, unflinching. "Actually, they do. And if you don't believe me, feel free to check with the HOA board. They've already seen these documents and are investigating the matter. Or better yet, talk to my lawyer, he'll explain everything." Karen stammered, clearly caught off guard. She glanced around, hoping someone else would step in to support her, but all she saw were curious neighbors watching from a distance. Even her usual bravado seemed to falter under the weight of undeniable evidence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she snapped the folder shut and glared at the woman. "This isn't over," Karen muttered, though her words lacked conviction. "You'll regret this." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving behind a trail of dust. The group erupted into cheers and applause, celebrating the small but significant victory. One of the friends joked, "Did you see her face? Priceless." Another chimed in, "She looked like she'd just been served a subpoena." The woman laughed along with them, but deep down, she knew Karen wouldn't give up easily. People like her rarely backed down without a fight. Still, seeing the fear or at least uncertainty in Karen's eyes gave her hope. Maybe this would finally put an end to the bullying and intimidation tactics. As the day went on, the group settled into their activities, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company. They paddled around the lake in kayaks, shared stories over sandwiches, and even roasted marshmallows by the fire pit as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was everything the woman had hoped for: a peaceful, joyful day spent reconnecting with nature and loved ones. But even amidst the laughter, her mind kept drifting back to Karen. Who was she, really? What drove her to act the way she did? Was it insecurity, loneliness, or simply a need for control? The woman realized she might never fully understand Karen's motivations, but she also knew it didn't matter. What mattered was standing firm in her truth and refusing to let anyone dictate her life. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle above the lake, the woman sat quietly by the water, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about her uncle and how proud he would have been to see her defending their family's legacy. She thought about her friends, who had shown up not just to enjoy the lake but to support her in her fight. And she thought about the broader lesson she had learned: sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't just about winning, it's about reclaiming your power and refusing to be silenced. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from one of her neighbors, thanking her for standing up to Karen. "We've all been waiting for someone to do that," the message read. "Thank you for being brave enough to take her on." The woman smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't set out to become a hero or change the neighborhood dynamic, but maybe, just maybe, she had sparked something bigger than herself. By challenging Karen, she had opened the door for others to question authority and demand fairness. That realization filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As she stared out at the darkened lake, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would continue to stand her ground. She owed it not only to herself and her uncle but to everyone who deserved to live without fear of unjustified interference. And with that thought, she leaned back, letting the cool night breeze wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new conversations, and possibly more drama. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she had taken a crucial step toward justice and peace. The days following the latest showdown with Karen felt like a mix of triumph and tension. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood about what had happened at the lake. Some neighbors were thrilled to hear that someone had finally stood up to Karen, while others remained cautious, unsure if this would lead to more drama or actual change. The woman could feel the shift in the air. People seemed less intimidated by Karen now, but she also knew that Karen wouldn't let things go quietly. Karen, for her part, was seething. She couldn't believe that someone had dared to challenge her authority, and worse, that they had proof to back it up. For years, she'd ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist, enforcing HOA rules, real or imagined, without question. Most people avoided crossing her because they didn't want the hassle. But now, thanks to the woman's bold move, cracks were starting to show in Karen's carefully constructed facade. One evening, as the woman sat on her porch sipping tea, she noticed Karen pacing near her driveway. It was clear she wanted to say something, but she hesitated, glancing toward the house every few seconds. After a few minutes of watching Karen mutter to herself and adjust her sunglasses unnecessarily, the woman decided to step outside. "Looking for something?" she asked casually, leaning against the railing. Karen spun around, startled. "Oh, no," she stammered. Then, after a pause, she added, "I just wanted to clarify a few things." The woman raised an eyebrow. Clarify what? Karen took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain her composure. About these so-called documents you've been waving around. I spoke to the HOA board, and they're still reviewing them. Until then, nothing is official. The woman nodded slowly. That's fine. Let them review them. In the meantime, I assume you'll respect my rights as a property owner? Or do you plan to keep harassing me and my guests? Karen bristled at the word harassing. I'm not harassing anyone. I'm simply doing my job as a concerned homeowner. Concerned homeowner, the woman repeated, letting out a short laugh. Really? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're more interested in controlling people than protecting the community. Karen's face turned red, and she opened her mouth to argue, but the woman held up a hand to stop her. Look, I don't have time for games. If you have a legitimate issue, bring it up with the HOA or my lawyer. Otherwise, leave us alone. With that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Karen standing there fuming. For once, Karen didn't have a snappy comeback. Instead, she stormed off, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed with activity. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance started approaching the woman during her daily walks. One elderly man stopped her to thank her for standing up to Karen. We've all been afraid of her for years, he admitted. But seeing you take her on gives the rest of us hope. Another neighbor, a young mom with 2 kids, shyly confessed that Karen had once scolded her for letting her children play too loudly in their backyard. She told me I was disturbing the peace, the woman said, shaking her head. It's ridiculous. But after hearing about what you did, I think I might actually talk to her about it next time. These conversations reminded the woman why she had fought so hard in the first place. It wasn't just about defending her own property, it was about creating a safer, more welcoming environment for everyone. People shouldn't have to live in fear of being yelled at or bullied over minor issues. And while she knew one victory wouldn't magically fix everything, it was a start. Meanwhile, Karen grew increasingly isolated. Without her usual power to intimidate others, she struggled to maintain her grip on the neighborhood. At the next HOA meeting, she tried to rally support against the woman, claiming that allowing outsiders on the lake would ruin property values. But much to her dismay, many attendees pushed back, pointing out that the lake had always been accessible to residents and their guests. Even some members of the board seemed skeptical of Karen's arguments. Frustrated and humiliated, Karen began avoiding public gatherings altogether. She spent most of her time indoors, peeking out her windows whenever she heard laughter coming from the lake. It was almost poetic justice. The very thing she had tried to control was now thriving without her interference. Despite the progress, the woman knew better than to let her guard down completely. Karen was unpredictable, and there was always a chance she'd try to retaliate in some way. So, when she hosted another gathering at the lake a few weeks later, she made sure to document everything from photos of her guests enjoying themselves to screenshots of any messages Karen sent her. Preparation was key, and she wasn't about to give Karen any ammunition to use against her. This time, however, Karen didn't show up. Whether she was lying low or realized she couldn't win, no one knew for sure. Either way, the absence of her looming presence made the day feel lighter and more carefree. The group laughed and joked, sharing stories about times they'd dealt with difficult people in their own lives. Someone even brought up Karen, joking that she probably needed a hobby to keep herself busy instead of meddling in everyone else's business. As the sun set over the water, casting golden hues across the surface, the woman felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not only had she reclaimed her space, but she had also inspired others to stand up for themselves. Change wasn't easy, and it certainly didn't happen overnight, but she could see glimpses of a brighter future, a neighborhood where kindness and cooperation replaced fear and division. Before heading home that night, she paused by the water's edge, taking in the quiet beauty of the moment. The lake had always been a source of peace for her, but now it represented something more, resilience, courage, and the power of standing up for what's right. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she'd face them with the same determination that had brought her this far. And as she walked back to the cabin, surrounded by friends and the sound of nature, she allowed herself to smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly free. Weeks turned into months, and life at the lake began to settle into a new rhythm. The woman who had inherited the property found herself enjoying a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Gone were the days of looking over her shoulder, wondering when Karen or someone like her would swoop in to ruin the tranquility. Instead, she relished the quiet mornings, the laughter-filled afternoons with friends, and the calm evenings spent by the water. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to fade into the background. She still lived in her house up on the hill, but her presence around the neighborhood became less noticeable. Her once dominant voice at HOA meetings had softened to near silence, and her clipboard was rarely seen outside her home. Some neighbors whispered that she was embarrassed, while others thought she might finally be rethinking her approach to life. Whatever the reason, the tension she had created for so long began to dissolve. The woman noticed subtle changes in the community as well. Neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact or kept to themselves started saying hello more often. A few even invited her over for coffee or stopped by the cabin just to chat. One couple shared how they had always dreamed of hosting a small gathering by the lake but never did because of Karen's threats. Now, inspired by her example, they decided to take the leap, and it turned out beautifully. These moments filled her with a deep sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about winning a battle against Karen, it was about creating space for kindness and connection to grow. She realized that standing up for herself hadn't only benefited her, it had opened doors for others to live more freely too. One crisp autumn afternoon, the woman received an unexpected knock on her door. When she opened it, she found an older man standing there, holding a plate of freshly baked cookies. He introduced himself as Tom, a longtime resident of the neighborhood. "I just wanted to thank you," he said warmly. "You've made a real difference here." She smiled, inviting him in for a cup of tea. As they sat together in the cozy living room, Tom explained how much stress Karen's behavior had caused over the years. "We all knew what she was doing wasn't right, but no one wanted to rock the boat. Then you came along and showed us that it's okay to stand up for ourselves." He paused, glancing around the cabin. "This place means a lot to people, you know. Your uncle was a good man, he cared about this community. And now you're carrying on his legacy in your own way." His words touched her deeply. She had always admired her uncle for his generosity and love of nature, and hearing that others felt the same gave her a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, she truly understood the impact of her actions, not just for herself, but for the entire neighborhood. As winter approached, the woman decided to host one last get-together before the colder weather set in. This time, she extended invitations to several neighbors, hoping to bring everyone closer together. To her delight, nearly everyone accepted. The day of the gathering arrived, and the lakefront buzzed with activity. Kids ran around chasing each other, adults laughed over hot cider, and someone brought a guitar to play songs by the fire pit. Even Karen made a brief appearance, though she stayed on the outskirts of the group, watching quietly from a distance. At first, the woman hesitated, unsure whether to acknowledge her. But then she remembered something important: this wasn't about holding grudges, it was about moving forward. So, she walked over and offered Karen a warm smile. "Hey," she said gently. "Thanks for coming." Karen looked surprised, perhaps even a little uncomfortable. "I, just wanted to see what was going on," she mumbled. "Well, we're glad you're here," the woman replied sincerely. "It's nice to have everyone included." For a moment, Karen didn't respond. Then, almost reluctantly, she nodded. "Thanks," she said softly before excusing herself and heading back toward her house. While it wasn't exactly a heartfelt reconciliation, it was progress, and that was enough for now. As the year drew to a close, the woman reflected on everything that had happened. Standing up to Karen hadn't been easy, but it had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, courage, and the importance of community. She had learned that sometimes, the hardest battles are worth fighting not just for yourself, but for the people around you. The lake remained as beautiful as ever, its waters reflecting the changing seasons. But to her, it represented something far greater than scenery. It was a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that fairness and respect could overcome fear and intimidation. Whether she was sharing it with friends, family, or neighbors, it felt like a gift meant to be enjoyed, not controlled. On New Year's Eve, she stood by the shore, watching fireworks light up the sky in bursts of color. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the land she loved, the memories she cherished, and the connections she had forged along the way. Life wasn't perfect, and challenges would undoubtedly arise again. But she faced the future with confidence, knowing she had the strength to handle whatever came next. In that moment, surrounded by beauty and possibility, she whispered a silent thank you to her uncle, to her friends, and to the little cabin by the lake that had become so much more than just a piece of property. It was home. And it always would be.